Today's guest is Joyce Shin, founder of the Human Edge and former head of design operations at Dropbox, where she helps scale teams and organizational systems inside one of the world's leading technology companies. Now, through the Human Edge, Joyce is tackling a much bigger question. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, what remains uniquely human? Her work focuses on helping founders, CEOs, and organizations build the cognitive, creative, ethical, and leadership capacities that AI can't replicate, and redesigning organizations for a future where human judgment becomes the ultimate competitive advantage. Welcome to the stage, Joyce.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Super excited for today.
I am too. We've had a couple of chats. I'm super interested in the work that you're doing. I think it's very much necessary in today's world. And so why don't we just start with kind of like, who is Joyce Shin? How did you come about to doing what you're doing? Give us the founder story, and why are you so passionate about the human edge?
Yeah.
What drove you to leave? Yeah.
I'll go for it.
No. What I was going to say is obviously you must have a really strong conviction based on our conversation. You left a really well-paying job to come and build this.
Yeah. I think, I think this has stemmed from early on my interests. I've always been interested in humans, what makes us unique. I was born here in the US. I was born in Texas, but I lived in Ohio. I lived in Seoul. I lived in Tokyo. And having that type of diverse upbringing, I was really fortunate to be surrounded by different cultures, different belief
Mm-hmm.
systems, different
Mm-hmm.
languages. I think that really shaped my curiosity about what makes us human. What do we have more in common than what divides us? And so
Mm-hmm.
that really spurred my interest in neuroscience, and that's really what I studied undergrad. I was interested in learning about everything at different scales. So how atoms work, how neural synapses occur, to how we actually become aware of something, right? Not just perceive, all of those things. I had my own personal experience with it. And so I had a traumatic brain injury in my freshman year of college. And so I had my own personal journey of how to actually rebuild from the inside out. And so that shaped a lot of my personal fascination with how we actually build resilient teams in organizations. And that really led me to business and technology and reshaping how we work and how organizations and team function.
So from you said born in Texas, stints in Ohio. Now you're based in New York. You've lived in Tokyo. I think you said so. Like, what's the what is the common element in terms of how you build resiliencies? How do you build grit? How do you build performance? Like, culture is a culture, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking, or this is my personal belief, not being a neuroscientist, we all have the same needs and desires. Maybe our ways of understanding what self-actualization differs perhaps from a culture perspective, but if you had to kind of distill it down to like specific traits or specific characteristic or how to go about it, how would you advise companies and founders to go about building this?
Yeah. So I think that, if we leverage some of the cognitive strategies, as you mentioned, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can leverage just simple foundational principles of how our brains are organized. So the triune brain model. So for example, we have the reptilian brain, the neo-mammalian brain, and the paleo-mammalian brain, and then the neo-mammalian brain, right? And so as you mentioned, like we have to have the foundation set in place before we're able to
Mm-hmm.
achieve the higher order cognitive functions. And so making sure that we're designing teams where we have the baseline security, some of those um, elements where we're able to leverage different ways that we interact with our emotional processing and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that enables us to be more successful.
So one of the criticism that AI is drawing, and rightfully so, and this is just my personal perspective, that I don't think that we'll be able to get to a future where AI is sentient. I mean, at the end of the day, AI is compute. Um, how would you how would you enable these cognitive abilities? Like, I mean, I see my personal perspective, AI is an enabler. It's not a substitute. Maybe it can substitute computational tasks, but it's not a substitute for humans or human-related tasks. So, what is your perspective on it? Like, how do we continue to develop cognitive abilities? Because, I mean, one of my favorite tools at the moment is something that Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, had founded. It's Pi. It's a personal intelligence LLM that just for me, it has my, I guess, my memory and feelings and kind of how I feel about it, and have daily conversation, remind me about this and that, like building daily habits. But kind of like, what would be your approach in terms of building out cognitive abilities individually, cognitive abilities to the team, cognitive abilities to the organizational level?
Yeah. So I think it's, how do we leverage AI to actually build some of those muscles and build the scaffolding? So I think like
Hmm.
if we approach the way that like learning occurs, it doesn't occur in a linear fashion, it occurs in nonlinear ways. So I think it's really thinking through how we want different outcomes and how we want different abilities, what we want to build, and then actually design the ways that we build those
Hmm.
in tandem with AI, right? So, for
Hmm.
example, critical thinking, writing, communication, these are foundational human skills
Hmm.
that we can amplify with leveraging AI. Right. So, for example, writing, we can leverage it with giving us ideation, with proofreading, with editing. Instead of popping it into an LLM and having it give us an entire answer,
Hmm.
and that'll help us, lose our ability to write. How do we design it in a
Hmm.
way that still introduces friction in the right places in the process, enables us to still practice and build these skills that are critical for individuals to build as well as teams and organizations, right?
And that makes absolute sense. It echoes a lot of the studies out there. Um, there's a bit of a bifurcation, and I'm curious to get your perspective. There's a bit of a bifurcation when it comes to AI. If you use AI as a replacement, the studies are showing is that AI is making us dumber. If you use AI in the context in which you described it, it's actually making us smarter, because it's stretching our mental capacities in terms of what's possible. And so think of it as a creative partner. So this is kind of, I guess, one part of the question. The other one is like, you talked about learning being non-linear. How do you approach learning, and how would you advise companies to approach the transition from kind of like the current roles, and kind of how those roles evolve into the future, in terms of how do you equip the the workforce, or the people on the team, to transition from where they are today to where they need to be 5 years, 10 years out?
I think I think like it does change fundamentally like growth trajectories, right? We've typically viewed growth as a linear way of we got to stay in a role for 2 years, do X, Y, and Z things to move up. I think
Hmm.
now it's more getting disparate experiences. So how do we work with cross-functional partners? How do we get experience into different teams, different mindsets, different projects and work that enable us to actually develop a coherent, a unique perspective in our own work, right? That
Hmm.
enables us to think a little more differently, that enables us to think of different solutions, understand different perspectives in a way that allows us to be more successful and build better solutions and products, right? So I think like if we design it in a way that, how can we get experience from different teams versus just our own team? How do we
Hmm.
and there are more organizations doing the more horizontal exploration as a part of growth, right? But I think we're going to be seeing some more of those trends, especially now in the age of AI, right?
I mean, what you're describing to me seems like fundamental, and companies that embrace it and adopt it will position themselves well for success in the future. Um, do you have, I mean, model that you can kind of describe in terms of how companies should go about building this?
I mean, so what do you mean by what do you mean by like what model?
In terms of what you described, in terms of how companies should think about building out the skill set or building out the cognitive models in terms of how do they transition the workforce into the future?
Yeah, so I actually have a framework called the Pearls framework, and I've developed it based off of my experiences. And I think
Okay.
it's really based off around like how do you build your specific human edge in this new age of AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as like companies go from, or as we go from AI being able to do a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, doing all of our automation, doing all of like the, bare tasks, I'm thinking through like how do we make ourselves differentiate in this new age? And that I
Mm-hmm.
mapped out the Pearls framework, and um, it's
What does Pearl stand for?
Pearls. It stands for presence, edge, authority, roots, legacy, and signal. And I think these are the things that, shape our identities, our mindsets, and our perspectives as individuals. And if we scale them to organizations, they build the organizational and team edge as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
building some of those frameworks, I think, can enable, to identify what makes us unique and then enable that to infuse it into the way that we grow and the way that we learn. And,
Is the,
go for it. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say something about the name. Like, it's called the pearls because I developed it just like a pearl is formed in nature. Um, like, I actually looked up the history of how a pearl is formed. A sand goes through different transformations, whether it's pressure and time, and it's actually a mysterious process. We don't know how it's created, and then turns into a pearl. And I think all of us go through different mistakes, different failures, different experiences, and it's only through timeless wisdom, reflection, and time that we get to these insights or these pearls of wisdom. And so that's the name of the framework.
Love it. Can you just repeat for me the acronym? So it's presence. What was the engage?
Edge.
Edge?
Yep.
Okay. So edge. What is the A?
Is authority.
Authority. Okay. R.
Roots
Okay. L.
is legacy.
Okay. And S was signal.
Signal.
Um, so is this framework publicized anywhere? Published?
But not yet. I think this is the first time that
Not
I'm
yet.
sharing
Talking
it.
about it. I mean,
I've kept it very close to my heart, but I'm happy to share.
I, I think I think it's foundational in terms of what companies will need to embark upon. I mean, obviously they you have spent a significant amount of time thinking about it in order to develop the framework. I think this is a beautiful framework based on what you're describing. Um, in prior organizations, like one of the most common things we have done in terms of evaluating team performances is start with capability assessment to kind of understand what do we have on the team, and then what skills do we need to build and how do we go about it. But I really like uh, the tenacity, the multi-tenant aspects of the framework in terms of how you go about building this. Um, so yeah, I would love it without giving away the trade secret and the secret sauce. If you can, if you're able to share with our viewers and listeners, kind of like the gist, the summary of the framework, because I think it's an important framework.
Yeah, so I think typically like we do focus on a lot of like the technical and the operational skills, right? But we what we don't do is we don't really measure like the intangible skills, things like character, attitude, like motivation, mindset, identity. And those are the things that I'm trying to like get a framework around. And
Hmm.
so for P for presence, it's not just like your title, your skills, your experience, it's how you make people feel, how
Hmm.
you show up, how you carry yourself. Some of those like
Hmm.
nonverbals, right? Edge is Edge isn't just your opinions, your perspectives. It's your unique combination across different experiences, your perspectives that only you have, right?
Hmm.
Authority is not just your like credentials, like where you went to school or like your years of experience. It's that
Hmm.
earned credibility. So, mm, what makes like what did you go through to actually get those insights? What did you work on or things like that? And so it's really some of those things. And happy to I can go deeper, but
Do you mind just continuing
yeah.
down the line, kind of like the roots, legacy, and signals? Just give us a little bit more of a.
I think roots is I think it's more than just your background. It's more than where you just came from. It's like the deep history. It's
Hmm.
the nonlinear path that you took. It's both your
Hmm.
successes and the failures and how they really shape you. They're like the core of mm, what you want your foundations and your identity to be based off of. Legacy, I think, is thinking a little more broader. It's the longer term mindset and longer term perspective of how they shape your short term decisions. So, what type of legacy do you want to leave behind? What type of
Hmm.
broader impact do you want to have onto your communities and to your broader world? And so, that's the legacy. And I think that's something that we don't really talk about in a day to day basis. The last one is signal, which is really what makes you spiky. So it's not having a well rounded skill set per se. It's the themes that come up repeatedly. It is, they can come up in different variations, in different
Hmm.
formats. They could be things that different people that you know across different times of your life, the same things that they say about you. And so that's the signal piece. Like is the integration of everything.
Makes sense. I love this framework. I absolutely love it. Just based on kind of like what you shared. Um, as I'm thinking about this, it's an important framework through or important lens through which organizations think about building their capabilities. What capabilities do you think will become the most important, or maybe not the most important, but more important as AI becomes more capable and more prevalent within organizations?
I think it's developing the character, the resilience, the ability to adapt quickly. I think those are the
Mhm.
things that will be able to make us more successful is because
Mhm.
in the world that's increasingly changing, in the world that's increasingly moving faster, it's the ability to like spot what's happening in the future and then being able to adapt to that. Right? It's being able to bounce back from different situations, and it's being able to like do the right things in different situations as well. And so I think those are some of the key things that will make you more successful. I think it's also stems from your identity. So what you identify as, that really stems from a lot of your that
Mhm.
will impact a lot of your actions and behaviors.
I completely agree. Are you familiar with the high agency framework?
Well, oh, go for it.
Uh, uh, I mean, high agency just kind of describes the concept of a person or somebody that shows a lot of grit and resilience, that shows initiative, that sees challenges as opportunities, doesn't necessarily rely to be told what to do. It just somebody that sees everything, sees the world as can do instead of cannot do. Um, and so there's a number of different people that write about this, but to me, that what describes the people of the future are people at the high agency. Now, one thing that what I'm trying to understand and square off is like not everyone comes across as high agency, even if they are, because some people naturally kind of to your point. If I'm interpreting correctly, roots, you may have cultural connotation, cultural nuances that um, show up differently. It's not that you're not high agency; just you are bringing these is different. And so, are there things from a cultural perspective that people should be mindful of in terms of positioning themselves for success in the future?
I think it's more than I think it's instead of just like one thing, I think it's a cultural fluency. So I think it's being able to understand different cultures. I think being able to move between different cultures as well enables us to,
Hmm.
have better conversations, dialogue across the global landscape that we now live and work in. And so I think it's like the cultural fluency is going to be increasingly more critical and important in this new age.
I completely agree. I mean, I'm assuming that when you were at Dropbox, you were working with global teams, and so from that perspective, you need to be culturally fluent to understand who you're working with.
Yep, 100%.
What does then in this case, what does a psychologically resilient organization the future would actually look like in practice?
I think it's staying true to their values and who they are, right? So, like, we've
Hmm.
seen, organizations not take different stances across different situations, but I really respect organizations that, know who they are and make decisions that are consistent with that on a regular basis and over time. I think that's
Hmm.
what really builds trust with like, their customers, with different stakeholders, is some of those things. I think it's hard to do sometimes, but I think that builds that psychological resilience is that mindset of knowing who they are, what they stand for, and sticking through that through different situations and decisions that they make.
Just playing on this, one of the recent examples that comes to mind is Dario Amodei, like the founder of Anthropic, when I guess he lost the contract with the government because he said we're not going to use AI for war. I can't remember exact phrasing, but what is your perspective in situations like that, and how should leaders um, tackle situations like that where they have organizational culture that they have to be mindful. They have customer culture. They have brand. Um, it's a difficult situation to navigate. So how do you drive this psychological resilience? How do you drive the behavior within a company? And to your point, how does everyone within the organization know how should they behave?
I think that's why it's so important to focus on the leaders and the founders, right? Because it really stems from them. It's the example that they set. And so if they see the leader doing, staying true to their values, the employees are going to be more likely to stay true to their values.
Hmm.
And so I think, I think that really sets the stage and that really sets the environment and the conditions for which all the employees operate in, right? And so that's why it's so critical to focus on like the leader's edges first, because that sets the
Hmm.
stage for how the team and the organizations will operate, behave, and make decisions. And so the way that would be, if that's the way that I would view the role of leaders.
Are there? I'm curious. Are there signals or early warning signs that a company maybe outwardly successful, they're scaling operationally, but decaying cognitively or culturally?
I think, you can see like the typical metrics of like engagement, attrition, turnover, interest, things like that. But I think you
But
can,
those are lagging indicators. They kind
yeah.
of in the past, like, okay, we've had turnover, like our turnover is X%. Kind of like, eh, if you're leading, is there anything that you kind of like a leading indicator that you're looking is like, okay, I need to monitor this, or like if like training hours, for example, is a leading indicator how much time I'm going to invest versus like why I had an employee turnover. Like, how would you help founders and leaders think about what are the things to watch out for?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things to watch out for is just like gen I mean, that's an interesting question, I think. What are the leading indicators? I think it's like people's willingness to go above and beyond. I think that would be an indicator that they actually do buy
Mhm.
into like the bigger mission or the bigger purpose. I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is just their ability to, um, you know, work well within that group. That
Mhm.
means that like that cultural fluency is there. That that team bonding and that team element has been
Mhm.
developed, and so that plays a role in the success of and the
Yeah.
success of an organization and team. So I think those are two of the potential leading indicators.
I'm not trying to be provocative, but I'm curious. Are you aware and do you believe that companies will start to use AI in a way that drives semantic analysis? Like for example, like it's reading communication and whether it's through uh, chat apps or email and it's looking for sentiment in terms of like um, are people happy? Are people not happy? Are people engaged? Are they not? Are they raising the hand? Are they not?
I think it's not already happening. I think you can tell some of those things by like asking any LLM to analyze tone, voice, or
Hmm.
things like that. So I think that it is already happening, and I think that you could even change and modify the type of emails you want to write, whether it's like professional, casual, informal, anything like that, right? And so I think the sentiment piece definitely is happening. I think it's only going to get better.
Hmm. Makes sense. Now, I see you as as a blue flame thinker, and obviously the 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 studying that you have done in terms of neuroscience. How would you parlay this in terms of organizational design? How would you advise companies to redesign the organization for the AI era?
Yeah, so I think that neuroscience really provides insights into how we can create environments to build high-performing and resilient teams based off of how we think, how we're fundamentally wired. Because organizations really haven't been designed to do so, this is an incredible opportunity to, tweak and refine some of those strategies, right?
Hmm.
I think a lot of organizations already realize that people are the most important asset, or people are a very important asset.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of taking the next logical step to actually build, to embed that into the operations of a team and organization.
Makes sense. And I couldn't agree more. For most companies these days, unless we're talking industrial companies, the asset really goes up and down the elevator every night and every morning. So, as you're thinking about this, which job functions do you think will become dramatically more valuable because of AI rather than being replaced by AI?
I think things like partnerships, I think community building, communication, I think
Hmm.
those would be the things that will become
Hmm.
incredibly more valuable in terms of how
Hmm.
do we actually tell our decisions, communicate our product, our vision, our story to
Hmm.
different stakeholders. I think partnerships will become another increasingly critical one in terms of
Hmm.
how do we build global partnerships? How do we build partnerships for the long run versus just the short term? How do we build partnerships that are how do we build trust in our partnerships? And so I think those would be some of the things that will become increasingly important in this new age.
I mean, those are all innately human, and it makes sense. Like those cannot be substituted. How should scale-up founders think about this as a competitive advantage or as a moat in terms of partnerships, communities? Like, what would be what would be your advice? How would you orchestrate it?
I think this is going to be one of the ways that they can definitely lean in on, and this is going to be one of the differentiating values is, because as AI can do so much, that really commoditizes the average. And so the way to stand out is through these relationships, through these
Okay.
connections, and through the communities that they build.
I agree. I love what you just said, that AI commoditizes the average. So how do you, uh, uh, like, do you have a characteristic, or do you have um, advice in terms of how do you elevate from the average in terms of like what it's building community, what it's building customer success organizations, what it's like positioning yourself for the future, building modes, kind of like how do you move off from the average, which AI is amazing at, because it's statistical modeling, but like getting to a point where, like just one of the most publicized cases in terms of Jeff Bezos being customer obsessed, like if we're building communities, if we're focusing on customers, if we are focusing on partnership, how do you elevate that to that level where everything that companies do is kind of like the 10-star experience?
Yeah. I think it starts with being like not trying to be like perfect and having everything branded a
Hmm.
certain way. I think it's actually being authentic and not authentic by
Hmm.
oversharing. I think it's like the unique things that make a company unique, like the quirks, the imperfections of leadership, I think those are the things that if you share them in a way that is genuinely human because it's real life, I think that's going to be the thing that resonates with people. I think that's what builds trust through your partnerships, through your clients, through your employees. I think those are the things that we're gonna
Hmm.
want to index on are the actual human qualities because humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes. Um, like I think if like and we can see like we all know that we all make mistakes, and so like not being afraid to I guess cover all of those things in such a polished way. I think that's one way to build some of that trust and build some of that competitive moat.
Makes sense. Um, I'm just I'm fascinated I'm fascinated with people that have been part of like very fast growing companies. I would love if you can share a little bit about your Dropbox experience and what was that like?
I loved it there. So I joined 3 months after the IPO, so I missed the IPO phase. That's one of my dreams is I want to IPO with the company. But I really got the best of that experience where I got like
Okay.
I got that startup culture and I got all of their growing pains, right? Growing
Yeah.
and scaling pains. So I joined originally in the recruiting operations team, and so was aligned with the design team there. And so really got to see the ins and outs of how a company hires, retains, maintains their people. Mm. I worked on
Hmm.
so many different projects. I was one of those people who like I like to meet different people, and so I started chatting with people on different teams, different departments,
Yeah.
and just got to learn about what they were doing, what they were working on,
Yeah.
and just naturally worked on different projects with them, collaborated in different ways, and built those relationships early on. And I think that really provided a lot of value just for myself in terms of knowing what I was good at, where I wanted to grow, and where I just naturally gravitated towards. And so I loved it there. I went through different office moves with them, um, but ultimately transitioned over to their design operations team. And I loved it even more there, where I got to see just a whole different landscape of the product engineering design dynamic and how, from a user experience, how things were built and things like that. Really loved the time there. It was incredible to see to grow with a company and I to see them through, you know, COVID, through going from in-person to virtual, through all those transitions, different acquisitions as well. It was amazing.
Um, I mean, acquisitions are probably one of the hardest things from a cultural perspective in terms of driving integration. Um, how did um, Dropbox approach it? Were there any kind of aha moments? Anything that was just unique to what was being done there?
So I don't know if it was unique, and I don't think I had the purview from a company perspective. I had the purview from like the organizational
Yeah.
perspective. So
Yeah.
I was in charge of like when we did acquire, how were we actually going to integrate the creative teams with our creative teams from a business
Yeah.
perspective and then from a cultural perspective, racial
Hmm.
perspective, right? They were using different tools, they needed different access, emails, all of that type of stuff. Like
Yeah.
has to be managed on the back end. And so that's what I was doing some of the integration with, and also just some of the different cultural, making sure everyone like like was happy, getting along, fitting in,
Yeah.
and like didn't feel left out. Some of those things, I think it's important. I think for to ensure like a successful transition and successful transition, right? Because that's everyone's everyday experience. And so those are
Mhm.
some of the things that I thought were most important, and those are the things that I indexed on in my role.
Um, Curious, what were the things that were breaking as Dropbox was scaling? What were the processes that were just not holding up? Scale is hard. Growth is phenomenal, and that's fantastic. But you have to be able to shore up the foundation.
I think one of the things was just the manual element of everything. So when I was there, like things
Okay.
were being still being tracked like manually in like documents versus Excel, or things were being tracked in Excel versus automated dashboards. And so like I think
Hmm.
that was the part that I actually did help transition and scale some of those automations. But I think those are some of the things that were very manual that were to be expected because they were a
Hmm.
startup, and it is part of that growing and scaling, some of those growing pains, right? And so
When you joined Dropbox, how many employees were at Dropbox, and when you left, how many employees were there?
I guess it wasn't a start. It wasn't a start. It was a established company.
Well, it's an
Um,
IPO company, yeah.
yeah. So I don't. I can't quite remember the exact numbers, so I don't want to misquote them, but
Okay.
I think it was like around like 3,000 or so. But
Hmm.
I'm not 100% sure.
Hmm. 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 Um, the human edge. What were the primary focus at the human edge? And what was the moment you realized that this company needs to exist and need to focus on this? Why start this company now? Kind of like give us your conviction behind the human edge.
I think it's because AI is moving so fast. I think that there is a gap in the market in terms of there is going to be an identity shift that that's going to happen in terms of if AI can do what I can do, what makes me different?
Hmm.
What value do I
Hmm.
provide? And so helping to build some of those identities, build some of those skills, I think is increasingly important, especially for some of the younger people today, where they are thinking through what jobs do they have?
Hmm.
What is their future going to be? And so I think, be the time that they're most excited about their lives, most excited about their futures. And so how do we keep that momentum going for some of these younger people and the next leaders and professional entrepreneurs? And so that's really driving some of the work and some of the need here.
Interesting. If we have a prospective customers listening, kind of like, uh, what are the signals that they should be aware of in terms of like identifying that I have a problem, I need to solve this problem, and then in order to be able to perhaps sell it to a decision maker that holds the purse strings, kind of like what's the ROI from that can be derived from engaging the human edge?
Yeah. So I think, we've seen a lot of the research that says a lot of the current adoption isn't as successful as it could be. And I think, it's because it's not making a customized, individualized approach. And so
Hmm.
if we start from what makes you competitive in this age? What makes your company and your organization competitive? What is your edge? And then,
Mm-hmm.
if we map onto that, the AI adoption strategy, that's going to make it more successful in terms of how you leverage AI, how you don't want to leverage AI, when you use it, when you don't want to use it, what data has, what it doesn't have access to. Those are based off of all of the leaders' parameters and values. And so I think that's one way to get the ROI in terms of implementing AI to drive cost efficiencies as well as
Mm-hmm.
productivity gains. I think that's one way. I think, if leaders are thinking through how do they remain competitive in this new age, makes them differentiated, I think those are all the, and if they're thinking through like, hey, like I want to make sure that I'm competitive in the next year, the next 5 years, and building organizations that are high functioning, resilient, high performing, I think those are all key indicators.
Do you have advice in terms of how leaders should think about org design, vis-a-vis what you just said in terms of AI is here to stay, kind of like how we should combine human and AI?
Yeah, so I think in terms of org design, I think of it as understanding the actual people and the individual. So if I were to map on this type of language, it'd be like understanding your people's individual edges, and so like what they want, where they come from, like what their skill sets actually are, how they
Mm-hmm.
want to grow, what they're
Mm-hmm.
like, what they're spiky in, and then like designing the team based around some of those, based mm, designing the team based around some of those skill sets, then integrating into that the integration that they have with it, how they leverage it, um, where the humans still are in those different loops. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one way to create teams to be resilient as well as hyper.
Thanks. Any parting thoughts, any words of wisdom that you can pass on to our founders and listeners?
I mean, I think this is one of the most incredible opportunities and the most exciting times that we're going to be in. We literally have the ability to create the future that we want to live in. And I think that to me is just exciting where as founders, as leaders, you can literally create the conditions for your team. And so, I mean, I think, it's just going to be more exciting to index on the things that you're specifically capable of. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we're going to see more of that and that's something like it's going to be interesting to see like what innovations, what different types of products and things people come up with.
Curiosity question: do you think that we're going to see more people naturally follow their innate strengths and abilities, because now we have greater visibility, so maybe greater awareness around kind of like what are we good at and what we're not good at? Or
I think
I'm just curious.
it can be bifurcated where I think like you have the incredible opportunity to index on the things that you're good at. And then you
Mm-hmm.
also have the incredible opportunity to really get better at the things that you're a little weaker in, right? Because we have
Mm-hmm.
the tools available, we have the technology available. So I think we're going to see maybe like a both of really skilled in specific areas and then well-rounded in generalist areas as well.
Do you think that we're going to see fluidity in role descriptions? Like, I mean, greater fluidity?
What do you mean by that?
Uh, my context behind the question is like, before we had a role description and that person was doing A, B, and C, and that's kind of like what they did. And now with AI, we're seeing this morphing of skills and abilities be enabled by AI. And so if you know how to use AI, it becomes a super tool for you. So I'm just thinking like the previous role definition, at least the hypothesis that they hold is the previous role definitions are no longer going to be valid or not valid in the same capacity. Like if you have an accounts payable clerk, I mean, maybe, but even there, if it's accounts payable, I'm assuming that role can be largely automated. You can use blockchain, you can use different technology to kind of like, payment invoice comes in, it matches certain controls. it matches certain criteria, the controls are applied, and executes automatically. So I'm just kind of curious as to how would the roles evolve.
I think they're gonna be more like I mean, it depends. It depends. Like, so it depends on like the different levels too, right? So if you're still a junior, like a junior person, I think there's still a
Hmm.
certain level of um more basic things that you're gonna have to learn in terms of
Hmm.
technical operations,
Hmm.
just how a business and a company operates. Um, And then I think, as you get more senior and as you get more like a domain expertise, then you're going to be the ones that like be consulted on when, you know, working in like the feedback loops
Hmm.
for AI,
Hmm.
building those partnerships, the more relational dynamics, right? And
Hmm.
so I think it does depend on uh, the different levels and the different seniority of work.
Hmm.
I think that is interesting to see with the different skill sets that are coming on too. The younger people today, like they can leverage AI because they've grown up with it, and so a lot easier. And so I think like it's going to be interesting to see what that dynamic is,
Hmm.
and it's going to be very interesting to see what that dynamic is, and interesting to work with leaders to actually create the ways that we can all cohesively work together in this new age.
Um, Wanted to follow this thread for just a second. What would be the role of a leader, as a senior leader or CEO in the age of AI? Kind of like, what would they do versus what would AI do? And kind of like, how would the teams be organized? And kind of like, I'm just kind of curious, what does the future of the CEO role look like in the age of AI?
I think it's definitely more like, and this is what I would index on is like, how do you create the actual environments for your team? So
Hmm.
like, how do you create the operating norms, the practices, the cultures that your team operates in? And your teams can actually design how they interact with AI, right? Because they know, because they're on the ground, they're doing the work. So I think like the leader's job is to create that larger container in which the organization functions,
Hmm.
how they make decisions, how they speak up, what they stand for. So I think it's going to be more of the landscape is creating the conditions in which your people perform. And that's going to ultimately create more resilient organizations as well as more integrated with AI organizations as well.
Thanks, Joyce. Last question, I promise. If people are looking to follow your work and get in touch with you to talk about a human edge, to talk about the Pearls framework, how should they go about it? Where should they follow your work?
I'm active on LinkedIn, so definitely follow me on LinkedIn. You can also reach me through well, LinkedIn is probably the best way. And
Okay,
I'm definitely responsive there.
amazing. Well, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom, pun intended. This has been extremely valuable.
Well, thank you so much, Maxim. I'm very happy to be invited to this opportunity. And so thank you so much.
My pleasure.